One of the toughest things about a job search for high school students is following up after applying or interviewing. It can be a very intimidating thing, but it's important, and it can be the difference between getting the job or not. This week, we're talking about following up after applying and interviewing. It is the week of April 6th through the 10th, 2015, and this is the QC Step Podcast. Hi, and thanks for downloading this week's episode of the QC Step Podcast. I'm Corey Finneran. Last week we talked about the things that you can do to stand out in the application and interview process and how you can show that you want the job more than other applicants. Well, this week we're moving on to the next step in the process, and that is following up after you apply and interview for a position. If you don't know what we mean by following up, this means making contact with the employer after you apply and or interview. And there's a few reasons to do this. Number one, it shows the employer that you want the job. You're motivated and you are expressing that desire to work for them. Number two, it helps them remember you. Typically, businesses interview several people for positions, and this is especially true in retail and with entry-level positions. For example, Hy-Vee will frequently do open interviews. It's possible that in an afternoon, a hiring manager could interview 10 or 15 people, maybe even more. So if you want to stand out and show that you want the job more than other applicants, like we talked about on last week's episode, then you should follow up. If you don't follow up and other people do, then a hiring manager is going to think about the other applicants when looking over the applications again, and they're going to think that those other applicants want the job more than you do. We've now established that you should follow up after applying and interviewing, but how do you do it? Doing the following up, that's a difficult thing for high school students. So on this episode, we're going to try and simplify it and make it as pain-free as possible. First off, like everything in your job search process, you should be the one following up with the employer. Not your parent, not your teacher, not your brother or sister, your cousin, not your friends. You are the one that will be working the job, and you should be the only point of contact for that business that you apply with. So how do you follow up after applying for the job? The first thing you'll want to do when you turn in the application is ask if you can speak with the hiring manager so that you can personally hand over to them your application. When you hand it to them, tell them that you are very interested in working for them and you would like to know what the next step is. They will probably tell you when they plan to review applications and when they plan to conduct the interviews. And this will give you an idea of when you should call to follow up on your application. The timing of your follow-ups will be determined by the timeline that the employer has shared with you. You can do that follow-up over the phone or in person. If you go in person, make sure that you're dressed for an interview, and you'll want to make a good impression. So whether you do this follow-up in person or over the phone, it should go something like this. Hi, I'm Corey Finneran, and I recently applied for the courtesy clerk position. I'm very interested in this opportunity, and I would love to work for your store. Have you had the chance to look over my application? I would love the opportunity to interview for this position. So that's for following up after you apply for a job. So let's say you get the interview, and now you're going to follow up after that. I was talking with Gary about this today, and here's our advice. It's best to follow up after an interview with either an email or a handwritten letter. And this is a good reason to ask the person interviewing you for their business card. If you do that, you'll have their email address and their mailing address. So in that email or letter, you will want to thank them for their time and then express your interest in the job. That is probably as far as you should go with following up. Making any more contact than that would probably be pestering. Now, the person you talk to or need to talk to may not be there, and so you might have to call back at another time. But you should probably limit your contact to once after you turn in the application and then once after the interview. Every situation is different though, and if you have any questions about following up after you apply or you interview, and talk with Gary or Carrie about your situation. You can ask your STEP or your co-op teacher to get a hold of them for you, or you can email me info@qcstep.com and I'll pass it along to them.
Watch your movie I've seen 5 times before. Fall asleep with my head.
If you pick up an application and you're filling it out, maybe you're not sure how to fill out a certain portion of the application, we're here to help you. If you post your questions on the QC Step Facebook page or tweet them to us, I will get notifications sent directly to me, and I will be happy to help you with whatever question you have. Thanks for watching and listening to this week's episode. There will not be an episode next week, so I will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the QC Step Podcast.